All right, guys, so here's what I did to reassert my masculinity. So, just to give you a brief backdrop, like maybe many of you, I had a liberal arts education, right? So, by default, right, it didn't even have to be named anything, but by default, um, you automatically are sort of indoctrinated into sort of like a feminist narrative, right? A feminine understanding of the way the world should be as opposed to how it actually is. And so naturally, you begin to lose sight of what it means to be a man and how you're supposed to conduct yourself and behave. So I spent many of my younger years, my early 20s, trying to figure out what it even meant, right? And sort of capitulating to those sort of like social pressures to kind of fit into that mold, right? Of being like, you know, liberal, open-minded. And so a lot of things that right now I'm like, oh, I don't even know how I fell into that trap, right? But when you're in it, you don't realize you're in it. And so I think one of the things I started thinking about was like, well, how do I reassert my masculinity, who I was, that inner child, right? So I started thinking, okay, how was I when I was younger? So I looked back and I remember I was energetic, rambunctious. I was a fighter. Um, Things that I wasn't any longer. Right now, I was sedentary. I was passive. Um, Nothing that really resonated with who I was as a child, right? And I figured, well, what could I do to tap back into that and to find myself again, right? So I started doing some of that soul searching, right? And I felt like I found myself, and I felt like I need to tap back into what that inner child is. So think about that, right? Look back to how you were as a child. Were you aggressive? Were you energetic? Were you jovial? Were you curious? All these things, right? That made you who you were. Find that again if you feel like you've lost it, and see how that helps with identifying, your masculine traits. The other one is, other thing I did to sort of reassert my masculinity was I started putting up with less nonsense, right? I was not afraid to say no. I wasn't afraid to get into it with people if I felt like something was wrong, um, especially bullies. So I definitely voiced my opinions more. Obviously, you're gonna realize when you do that, especially when you disagree with what the crowd is, you're gonna get a lot of pushback, right? And you got to be ready for that. So that's one of the things that comes with being, masculine. The other thing was that I stopped sacrificing myself. Uh, a lot of times when people would ask me for things, I would just say yes without even thinking about it, and then realizing later on that I wasn't comfortable and I didn't want to do these things. So one of the things that I use now is I say no first, and then I can, if I want to change my mind, I say yes after. But most times, if it's not an essential thing, then I'll naturally say no. Because what ends up happening is that people pull you in all kinds of directions, and you end up just it ends up taxing your energy, right? And you want to use that for your endeavors, right? Don't waste time, you know, doing other people's bidding for them, right? Because at the end of the day, I think you have to prioritize yourself first. If after that you find the decency and the need to want to help somebody, or you're just kind enough to do it, that's different, right? But for sure, you always want to prioritize who you are. And I think after I started doing these things, I really did begin to sort of feel like back to who I was, like a masculine man, right? And not just sort of like trying to be like this sneaky guy, trying to run game and stuff like that. Obviously the unintended side effects of being a masculine man is that a lot of women, as much as they might try to say they don't like it, they really do. They really do respect it. Even if they don't like you, they'll at least respect you. And I think that's the most important thing, is to think about that, right? Is that being masculine, being in your masculine frame will definitely get you respect. So yeah, I just hope it helps. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is really have that conversation with your younger self, with your inner child, and see how you can calibrate with that and see how it helps. And but yeah, so this was just my experience about how I reasserted my masculinity, and I hope it helps you on your journey in finding who you are and finding yourself and getting on the right track. All right, I'll see you on the next one.